The Battle of Gettysburg would become the bloodiest battle of the entire Civil War, leaving a permanent mark on American history. But this battle wasn't just about numbers, it would change the course of the war, setting the stage for a major turning point in the conflict. The battle took place in 1863, after Confederate General Robert E. Lee had led his army to a stunning victory at the Battle of Chancellorsville. Despite being outnumbered nearly 2-1, Lee's forces triumphed between April 30th and May 6, 1863. Emboldened by his success at Chancellorsville, Lee launched his second invasion of the North. His first attempt at the Battle of Antietam in 1862 had failed, but now, with his 72,000-man army, Lee saw an opportunity to shake things up. This second invasion into the North wasn't just about winning, it was a strategy to disrupt Union plans, live off rich northern farmland, and relieve the pressure building on war-torn Virginia. If Lee could secure a foothold in the North, his forces could threaten major cities like Philadelphia, Baltimore, and even Washington, D.C. It could also strengthen the growing peace movement in the North, which was weary of the war. For both sides, Gettysburg would be a do-or-die battle. Neither could afford to lose. This fight would not just be about winning a battlefield, it would decide the future of the war itself. Gettysburg was more than just a clash of armies. It would become a symbol of what was at stake in the Civil War: freedom, the future of a divided nation, and the lives of countless soldiers. In the next few minutes, we'll break down what happened on those hallowed grounds and why Gettysburg remains a defining moment in American history. Day 1. After the Union's defeat at the Battle of Chancellorsville, Army Commander Joseph Hooker seemed hesitant to re-engage Robert E. Lee's army. President Abraham Lincoln, losing confidence in Hooker, replaced him with Major General George Gordon Meade. Meade wasted no time. He immediately ordered Union forces to pursue Lee's 72,000-man army, which had crossed the Potomac River into Maryland and was marching towards southern Pennsylvania. As Lee learned of the Union's pursuit, he decided to assemble his forces in the town of Gettysburg, just 35 miles southwest of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The stage was set for a major clash. On July 1, 1863, one Confederate division, led by Generals A.P. Hill and Richard S. Ewell, approached Gettysburg in search of supplies. Unbeknownst to them, 2 Union cavalry brigades had arrived just a day earlier. With the majority of both armies still on the move, the Confederate forces quickly took advantage of the outnumbered Union cavalry, driving them back to Cemetery Hill, just half a mile south of Gettysburg. After this initial success, Lee ordered his forces to push forward, hoping to capitalize on the momentum before more Union troops could arrive. But when Ewell's division was poised to strike again, Ewell refused, deeming the Union position too strong to break. This decision would prove critical. With no follow-up attack, Union reinforcements led by General Winfield Scott Hancock arrived, extending the defensive line along Cemetery Ridge and fortifying the hill known as Little Round Top. By the end of the first day, 3 more Union corps had arrived, further strengthening the defenses and setting the stage for the brutal days to come. Day 2. As the second day of battle began, the Union forces had secured a strong defensive position stretching from Culp's Hill to Cemetery Ridge. The Confederate commander, General Robert E. Lee, decided to launch a major attack, even though his second-in-command, General James Longstreet, strongly advised against it. Lee ordered Longstreet to strike the Union left, while General Ewell and his forces would attack the right near Culp's Hill. Lee wanted the attack to begin at dawn, but due to delays it wasn't until 4 p.m. before Longstreet could begin the assault. By then, both sides were set for a bloody confrontation. General Daniel Sickles, commanding the Union's 3rd Corps, held a defensive line that stretched across rocky terrain like Devil's Den, Peach Orchard, and the wheat fields near Little Round Top. Despite overwhelming pressure, the Union's main regiment showed extraordinary bravery and managed to hold Little Round Top, preventing the Confederates from advancing further. But it wasn't all good news for the Union. They began losing ground at Devil's Den and then Peach Orchard. General Sickles, disobeying orders, had extended his line too thin at Peach Orchard, making it vulnerable. The Confederates exploited this weakness, and Sickles was severely wounded by a cannonball to the leg. He survived, but had to have his leg amputated, and it was even donated to the National Museum of Health and Medicine. Meanwhile, General Ewell's forces launched their attack on the Union's right at Culp's Hill and East Cemetery Hill. Despite their efforts, Union forces managed to hold their ground. By the end of the day, the toll was staggering. Both sides suffered massive casualties, with over 9,000 men lost on each side. In total, nearly 35,000 casualties in just the first 2 days of the battle, the deadliest 2-day period of the entire war. The second day of Gettysburg was a brutal clash, one that set the stage for the dramatic events that would unfold on the third day of the battle. A3. On July 3, 1863, after losing ground the previous day, the Union forces of the 12th Army Corps were tasked with a crucial mission: retake the positions at Culp's Hill. In the early hours of that fateful day, Union artillery unleashed a powerful barrage onto the Confederate positions at Culp's Hill. The Confederate forces responded with their own artillery, but the Union held back, saving their ammunition for a much larger infantry assault that was already in the works. After hours of intense combat, the Union's 12th Army Corps successfully retook their positions at Culp's Hill, but their victory was short-lived. General Robert E. Lee, who had believed his forces were on the brink of victory just the day before, was preparing to launch a counterattack. Lee ordered 3 of his divisions, supported by artillery, to strike at the Union center at Cemetery Ridge. His goal was to break the Union line, but the task would not be an easy one. 15,000 Confederate men, led by General George Pickett, were given the daunting task of marching nearly 3/4 of a mile across open fields. They would face entrenched Union forces, ready and waiting. Lee's order for this assault, which would later become infamous as Pickett's charge, was met with protests from his own officers. Many believed it was a foolhardy move, but Lee was unwavering, convinced it was the only way to win. At 3 p.m. July 3rd, the Confederate assault began with a massive artillery bombardment from around 150 Confederate guns. But as the Confederate forces advanced, they found themselves facing deadly fire from behind the Union's stone wall defenses. As the Confederate attackers neared, Union infantry opened fire from their fortified positions, while Union regiments from Vermont, New York, and Ohio hit the enemy's flanks. Now, the Confederates were surrounded on all sides. The result was devastating for the Confederates. Barely half of the men who had marched in Pickett's charge would survive the brutal assault. Pickett's own division lost nearly 2/3 of its soldiers. As the Confederate forces retreated, General Lee scrambled to form a defensive line. The failed charge marked a turning point in the battle. It was clear the Confederates had lost. The hopes of a grand Confederate invasion into the North were now shattered. Gettysburg, a turning point in the Civil War, had ended in a crushing defeat for Lee's army. The day after the Union's decisive victory at Gettysburg, General Robert E. Lee found himself waiting for a Union counterattack, but that attack never came. By nightfall, Lee realized that no such offensive was forthcoming, and in a bold decision, he ordered his troops to retreat. The grand army of 72,000 men that had marched into the North was now completely decimated, leaving behind a shadow of its former self as it withdrew back to Virginia. Union General George Meade, who had led his forces to victory at Gettysburg, would face heavy criticism for not pursuing Lee's retreating army. But despite the critiques, one thing was clear: Meade had just dealt a devastating blow to the Confederacy. With 28,000 Confederate casualties, more than a third of Lee's army, and nearly 4,000 dead, the Confederacy had suffered irreplaceable losses. The Union, too, paid a heavy price with 23,000 casualties and around 3,000 dead, bringing the total deaths from the Battle of Gettysburg to a staggering 7,000, with nearly 50,000 casualties combined. Gettysburg would become the deadliest and bloodiest battle of the entire Civil War. After the defeat, General Lee offered his resignation to Confederate President Jefferson Davis, but his offer was refused. Despite the devastating loss, Lee remained in command, though the Confederate cause had been severely weakened. While Gettysburg was not the last victory or defeat for either side, it marked a crucial turning point. The momentum was now with the Union. Their path to victory seemed clearer, and the Confederate hopes for a grand invasion of the North were now dead. In November, just months after the battle, President Abraham Lincoln would visit the site of Gettysburg and deliver one of the most important speeches in American history, the Gettysburg Address. In his speech, Lincoln vowed to reunite the nation, not just through military victory, but through a moral mission: the cause of human liberty and the undeniable right of all men to be treated equally. Though the war would continue until April 1865, Gettysburg's impact on the rest of the conflict was undeniable. It became one of the defining moments of the war and of American history. Gettysburg set the stage for the Union's eventual victory. marking the moment when the Confederacy's fate was sealed. And the lessons of that battle would echo through the years, shaping the future of the United States forever. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your suggestions in the comments section for what topic you would like to see next.